From my generation, I was trained how to be a housewife.
The women's movement of the 60s.
And when I thought about going to college and what career I might have, it's like, well, you can be a teacher or you can be a nurse.
A part of our society. I mean, it took decades. And of course, it would be much slower in Afghanistan.
I never wanted to follow any rules. And I was always looking for ways to get around them. When I started studying photography and then doing that freelance, it led me down paths I never would have gone down. And I was really kind of looking for something new to do when I got inspired to do the Afghan Women's Project. And I had no idea where it was going to lead or anything. It was just, I'm going to do this little tiny thing and let it go at that and go back to my life. And instead it became my life. I started it in 2002, and if you remember at that time, whenever Afghan women would be in the media, they were always in black and white, they were sad, they were begging for support. And what I'm trying to do is to present a broader truth that some of it is opposing and some of it is contradictory with each other, but it's the reality. I'd never started something quite like this before, and I was really concerned before I went. And this was a leap of faith, that I would even find women that would talk to me. And yet I found the opposite. I found that the need for women to tell their stories was so strong.
He ended up saying, you know, I was born in war and I'll probably die in war. I can't wait for a better time. I need to do the things I need to do now.
And then there were these alive women. And the women were just so much like my friends. Many different women who have different opinions.
You know, in a way, these things were good for me also, because now we try to have cooperation with each other. We try not to bring black days for the other person.
I also wanted to show their lives and their country in a way that was not stereotypical.
And she also had a real different opinion of Taliban. She would, quote, fight with the Taliban or like argue with them about women's rights. And she didn't care what anybody thought. She didn't care that they might do something to her. She was going to say her piece, and she did.
And these women had entrusted me with their stories, and they said, please go back and tell President Obama this, or tell President Bush that. I mean, from 2003. And so I've kind of taken that on as my mandate, to let Americans understand a lot more about Afghanistan and Afghan women, because I think that information is transferable. If you learn to see Afghan women in a broad perspective, in a broad way, and with the long view, you can look at the Congo that way, you can look at Sudan that way, you can look at, you know, other crises around the world in that same way.
You know, who are these women?
If I get inspired by something, I tend to just go with it without worrying if all the details can be synced or if it can exactly work out. And generally, it does work out in one way or another. I've had failures and I've had disappointments and all of that, and I've learned how to navigate them, and especially learned how to pick myself up and keep going. I feel much more empowered today, now, than I did before I started this project, and way more than I did in my younger years. One of the most important things is curiosity. Really nurture and develop your curiosity. So when you see someone who's different from you, and there's so many different cultures here in the United States, be curious about not only just their background, but how does that background shape how they think, and how does it shape how they view the world.